the festivities that Ashburton's got to offer. Right, so let's get started. Now, it's my first time doing one of these. I'm really excited.
My first time being at one, so you're right.
There we go. Both in the same
First
team.
time interrogating a guitarist, great.
That's fantastic. So, a little bit background about myself, because I'm nowhere near as renowned as Malcolm over here. My name's Charles Roper. You probably got that from the poster, I know, pretty obvious. But I've done quite a few different things. I'm actually from this neck of the woods, but I'm based in Guildford, and I do a lot of gigs over in London and that kind of thing. Mainly some house band work, places like the Troy Bar and places of that ilk. I've also got experience teaching at the ACM, so the Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford, and they're a music university that's in London. I was the youngest lecturer to ever sort of teach there. Did that for a few years, so I started teaching there at 22. I'm 27 now, so you know, it's I know, I don't look it, you know, whenever I get shave, I get ID'd for buying Red Bull or something like that. It's crazy. So, what can I offer you guys? Because obviously a lot of you guys have got a lot of experience in loads of different areas, and I was racking my brains because I didn't want to pitch too low, I didn't want to pitch too high, because I didn't want to talk about crazy Lydian dominant concepts and that kind of rubbish, when everyone's kind of going, I have no idea what that is and it's kind of useless to me. So, I was thinking about the idea of what we can do to sort of like expand what we already know. So who here is guilty of practicing like one exercise, and then that one exercise comes out, let's say, in a solo, or maybe when you're recording something, and it's just like the same thing that exactly is what you practiced? I don't know, like me definitely. So today I kind of wanted to open up our brains a little bit and try and think about how we can vary it. So maybe introducing some new concepts to you, maybe some new techniques that you've not seen before, and stuff that you can apply to every level. So if it's just pentatonic licks, or whether it is the crazy jazz stuff, then you can apply it to that too. So, how about we open up with some music? I think that'd be pretty good. And also it'd be good to sound check as well.
Do it.
So, I've got a debut album coming out, which is coming out mid-January. That's my question earlier.
Yeah.
And I've got a few tracks here, like some master backing tracks sort of thing. So it's going to be a bit guitarioke, because obviously we don't have room for a drummer back here and stuff like that. Although I had an amazing drummer who's on this track, a guy called Jake Parrott, absolutely phenomenal, and he was like lecturing with me on drums instead of guitar, but honestly, phenomenal drummer. So this one's definitely one of the heavier tracks off of the album, but you know, wake up a bit of a different thing gets to up there.
Waking up.
That's the one.
Charles, just before you start, do you mind like giving a whack on your guitar just to make sure it's
Sure.
coming through? Yeah.
All good?
Cool. Yeah, we'll be alright.
Alright, sweet.
What scale was that?
It's
Yeah.
the natural minor scale,
Oh,
with
is
a bit
it?
of blues in there, that kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah. So there'll be a lot of flat five implications.
So when did you start? When did you get the first bite of wanting to do guitar?
Oh man, that's actually a really good question. So I got the first like bug for guitar, believe it or not, when I was a really awkward teenager. So I don't know what it is. There's something wrong up here for sure. Right? That's a very obvious thing if you talk to me for about 5 minutes. But when I was a kid, it was even worse. Like I was very almost non-verbal in a sense. Like not to say I was, you know, it's not that I didn't know what was happening. I was labelled a very good listener, because that's all I did. Was listen, and then I spoke a little bit here and there. I didn't really like school too much. Like I was good at it, but I didn't like it. And then when I was 13, like turning 14, my mum randomly said, "Oh, I met this guy and he teaches guitar, and you said about wanting to play guitar." So I was playing Guitar Hero, like the video game.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, man, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And after lesson 1 with the guy, it's actually a guy called Terrence Bebbage, who's actually local. He's in Top Nets, so you know, he's responsible for what you see today. So if there's any complaints, you know, go to him. That'd be fine. But he just played some improvisation in front of me, just out of the blue, just pulled something out. it was just magical just to see, you know, it was just really nice. He did teach me quite a lot of stuff in lesson 1, you know, taught me all the major chords, that kind of thing. But then showed me a little bit about what you can actually do with the guitar when you're a bit more proficient. And I remember driving her, like, you know, we're getting the lift back, I was driving then, 13, that'd be a bit illegal.
You get arrested.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not too fast enough. But I just thought, this is it. This is what I want to do. It was the weirdest thing. I've never had any calling as strong as guitar. Never. And I don't think I'm as successful as what I wanted to be right now, but I'm definitely making a living off of it, and I'm happy where I'm at, and hopefully in the future I reach the goals I want to reach. But it was just such a weird experience because I had no idea that I was going to take it as serious as I did, and I ended up spending hours and hours and hours practicing every day for years, and ended up actually making connections with the guys here at WM Guitars. Ended up doing an apprenticeship here actually as a guitar technician, and hell, even like just some really cool experiences of actually going to study at a university in Guildford, and I ended up teaching at that same university a couple of years later. But yeah, that was the start of it all, that sort of like, just an improvisation.
Yeah,
that was it.
That blew you away, like, that was it, I'm bitten now, I've been bitten.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt? Charles used to live next door to the school. Every break, you go home. I play guitar.
Yeah.
No social life at all.
No, guitar.
That was literally it, yeah.
Yeah.
And now, I'd label myself a very selfish guitar player. I do session work and I have played for a couple of people. Funnily enough, in lockdown I ended up doing some live streaming over Twitch, which is actually a gaming platform, but ended up doing a lot of music on it. And it broke out and I ended up getting quite a good small gathering. And ended up working or getting it introduced is a strong word, because he just came onto my stream and was like, hey, I'm this guy. The guy's name was Mark Hunter. He was the lead singer for a band called Chimera. It's a massive metal band in the 90s. And I had no idea who the guy was. Because I like metal, and I like metal, like fusion, I like everything. But I wasn't really into that scene of metal. But when I had a listen and had a look at what he'd done, I was really impressed. And he sent me a track to improvise over on the stream, and I did, and he was really impressed with my playing. He ended up getting in contact with me and saying, hey man, I'd love for you to play on this one track, and ended up being like this sort of really cool friendship. So every now and again we sort of catch up, like every couple of months, and play like a game of Call of Duty and chat online. And he tells me about his photography business, and he still does music stuff. Like last year he fronted for Lamb of God, but just on a whim because their singer was ill with COVID. And I was like, wow, this guy's still got connections, still got the chops. Yeah. And that guy's gone through throat cancer, and he's still doing it, you know. So I was, it's mind blowing. But he's still got. This is before record companies were really screwing people over with deals, so he's still got a good percentage of the rights to his original music. So he's able to live quite nicely off of that touring life and everything. So I'm really happy for him because he's living a good life and he's doing some good stuff with it, you know. But he's the most down to earth person I've ever met, and all the guys that I've met who are really high up in the industry, they are literally the most down to earth people you can imagine. There are, there's going to be a few oddballs and eccentrics because that's just part of artistry. Yeah. And if some people have labelled me a bit of a okay, but it's just a really fun experience to chat to some of those guys and hear what they've done. Any other questions before I get started with some of the old notes?
I just wanted to say, I love the sound of the Lydian dominance. I know you can do a bit of that later.
Yeah. I'll chuck a little bit in for you. Alright, so let me know if anything's too loud, too quiet, and then we'll go from there. So this one is called Sunday Yeezys. It's got it's a very weird name. It's from a weird story from the pub. That's where it all start. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. It's very 80s rock, this one. Very 80s rock. It's not the whole album, not the whole album's like this, but I've got to say, with inspirations like Paul Gilbert and stuff like that, like very much into that sort of scene. Let's go for it. Thank you very much. So yeah, that one's one of the tracks off of the 12 that are going to be released mid-January, and I've got a few shows lined up in February already, mainly around the sort of like London, Guildford way, but I'm trying to get a gig here, funnily in Ashburn if I can, because I've got a friend who's actually gigged here a few times, Nick Meyer. If you don't know Nick Meyer, he's a pretty unknown name, but he's played for some incredible people, including Jeff Beck. He was in Jeff Beck's band for 3 years, doing tours with him in like 2015, that sort of time. And he's also recently supported Steve Vai on his most recent tour, so pretty heavy hitter, and it's like wonderful being around guys like that. And he's actually a good friend, so every now and again just go out and have a jam, have some pizza, that kind of thing. But he's also sort of a mentor of mine, so like every now and again he'll be like, he actually gave me the idea for the release date because I was panicking and wanting to release it very quickly. And because I was basically, this is a really bad excuse, but the summer heat for me, in my room which I'm renting, the temperature was getting to 30 degrees, and I was sitting in front of my computer trying to record these lines, and my brain was quite literally melting. Like I just couldn't function very well. So I recorded all the tracks in a certain thing, but then the producer that I was working with, he wanted everything in a higher sample rate, so I had to re-record everything basically. And that's not a problem, because the drums were recorded in that sample rate, so it just meant that the guitars had to be redone. That was totally fine. But I underestimated how long I was going to take writing the solos, because I love improvising, but within the tracks for the album I wanted to write each solo so that it actually had some substance with it, some movement, some sort of journey. I know the a lot of notes thing isn't for everybody, and I'm not trying to make it for everybody. But for the people who it is for, i.e. people like me who like love that kind of thing, I want to make it something special, as much as I can anyway. You know, because there's some amazing guitarists out there. You know, other people, you know, in Italy, like who's up and coming, like was it Matteo Mancuso? Have you not seen him? Oh my god,
Right.
phenomenal player.
Yeah.
Plays with his fingers
Does
only.
he?
Yeah, does the same stuff that I'm doing with like
Right.
more a fusion vibe, but yeah, just fingers.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Absolutely mind blowing. So, does anyone have any questions about anything I've just done? Anything? Yes.
When you are playing fast like that, like 6 notes per beat, that kind of, you know, triple thing.
Yeah.
What is it that motivates you being into that speed? Is it because you can do so much harmonic movement, or is it your inspirations from the past, or what do you feel like you're doing with it?
Oh, man, I'm going to give an answer which sounds like some sort of really crap philosophy, but it's literally just because I found it cool.
Yeah.
That was it. You know,
Great,
but
yeah,
there's
yeah.
I can't say I had some sort of like mystical or divination or anything like that. It was just straight up. I loved the sound of that. I loved watching guys like Paul Gilbert, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani growing up, and Vinnie Moore, like all of those big shredders. And I also liked as well, like before I went to uni, I actually ended up discovering Guthrie Govan.
Yeah.
And if you don't know Guthrie, go and check him out. He's phenomenal.
He's one of those.
Yeah, and I've met the guy, and he's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
In fact, he actually taught at ACM, so the fact I've taught at the same place as him is kind of like yeah. But he taught there in like the early 2000s, so I was never met him professionally as such. It's just been like every now and again I'd sort of like go to a gig of his and I'd be like, oh hello. But he's a phenomenal fusion player, but from a rock background, and even though I've studied a lot of jazz and stuff like that, and I know obviously from that you probably won't be able to tell, but I've studied jazz, I've studied a bit of fusion, and I really thought of myself at some point as a fusion guitarist, because I can't really pin myself onto one thing. But there's only so many times you can play Spain and pretend like you're a fusion guy. And then I realised that it's really I'm a rock guy at heart, but have this weird sound that's just this mix. And I'm kind of happy with that, to be honest, because it is its own unique sound. Whether people like it or not, that's up to them at that point, you know. And one thing which I will say to anybody who wants to do the guitar thing and wants to make guitar their voice is you really cannot, it's not up to you whether people accept your music or not. And that's just to anybody, it's not up to you. It's not your business. So obviously marketing is and stuff like that, getting it out there, yes. But if someone listens to it and they go, that's it, you know, you can't change their mind. It's kind of like, if you look at a colour, you'll know, you'll like, you know, for example, I love the colour green. I knew that growing up, and obviously everyone's got their own favourite colour, and some people might not like green. So if you listen to a piece of music, you have the same sort of reaction. It's not up to you. You just listen to it, and it's like you either love it or you don't. So you cannot make that decision for other people, and you cannot take it personally when people make that decision, because it's really not up to them either. So it's a case of keep on releasing what you're doing, keep on marketing, and eventually finding people that do like what you do, and not to kind of create an echo chamber, but to try and just get it out there, you know. Because that's it's something which I struggled with quite a bit initially, because I remember going to try a few gigs and I thought, oh man, I've got the technical ability to do this. But similar to what happened to that guy who got fired earlier, you know, sometimes it might be like, oh, you're not exactly right for this sort of thing. And I used to really take that to heart and be like, oh man, I've got to really work on this stuff. And there are some things which I still work on now, like a good friend of mine, Carl Orr, he played for Sting for many years, and he literally said to me like, oh, I love your lead playing, but I'd love to hear you get to the same level with your lead playing as your rhythm playing and your rhythm chops. So I've been studying a lot of Paul Jackson Jr. because, I mean, I think he's the man for that, you know. So the guy who worked on George Duke stuff, so, you know, reach out, that kind of thing. So they're sort of like, get a bit of that tone. Like all that kind of stuff. Like it fits into the mix really well, and I remember him talking about it and really trying to find the pocket of where the guitar player can shine, and being able to sit back in a mix and just I remember studying that for it's been nearly a year now studying that kind of stuff, and it does inform your lead playing as well. And that's actually something which is an interesting thing, is writing. When I was writing the album, I found I was able to consolidate a lot of ideas. So if you've never tried writing a track before, if you're sitting in this room and you've played a lot of guitar, you've done the chronic bedroom thing where you just sit in there and that is it, try writing a piece of music. And you'll find that you will end up thinking, oh, I actually really like this sound, or I play this a lot, but I really don't like hearing it very much. And it'll make you start to sort of dissect your own playing, because you literally it's forced in front of you, especially when you're listening back to it so many times through whatever interface you're using, or record, or DAW, or however you're doing it, whether you're doing it analog or digital, you're going to have to listen to your own playing at some point. And we get so stuck in, oh, I want to sound cool, I want to look cool on stage. But listening to yourself in a recording is just absolutely mind-blowing. I remember hearing a bunch of mistakes early on in my career, when I was listening back to like early sessions and stuff like that, or recording initial ideas on my phone and everything, and you think, man, that's a really cool idea, but there's a lot of string noise here, or there's maybe a note that's just not right here. Or maybe you might even pick something up later on that you come back to, and then you think, actually, I'm going to revise that, and you come back to it. So writing will definitely do that for you, even if it's not your goal to be a solo artist or an artist with a band or anything like that. It's just cool also to have something that's yours. You know, you've got like this unique thing at the end that's like, yeah, this is my thing. And that's something which I actually missed quite a lot being a session guy, because you end up doing so many gigs for other people that eventually you kind of want your thing. So you kind of, when you go to somebody, instead of being like, oh, have you got any music? And you go, oh yeah, this person I've played with on BBC Radio London, and there's a recording which you can find online in this obscure link here. You can just go, yeah, this is it. Here, have this. It's on Spotify or whatever, and I'm going to have the joy of that in January when it's actually released. But for now, it's still all on my computer, and it's kind of awkward being like, yeah, you can listen to it, but you just got to come back to my bedroom. You know, it's like, oh man. But let's talk about some of the ideas about what I was doing in terms of how I started to develop my own sort of sound. So the bits I talked about earlier, the unique concept that sort of gives to everybody. So there was a few different ideas that I had, and I realised that what I was doing when I was talking earlier about the idea of playing exercise and only following that as like my sort of main mantra. I remember over lockdown I was practicing quintuplet runs because I didn't have any gigs at that point. I don't know whether anybody did when it was like start of lockdown and everything was shut down. So it was like, this is the time, yeah, we can practice for 7-8 hours a day. Yeah. Well, at least I said that. Some people would look at me and be like, why? Touch grass. Go somewhere else. You know? But yeah, I was practicing quintuplet runs, and I found that they obviously seeped their way into my playing, because obviously I was doing a lot of improvisational practice around it. So you ended up getting these sort of like these really smooth. And then you might speed up a bit, so. And that's cool, and then you can sort of, you know, you chuck that into a solo somewhere, maybe it's like a climax point, maybe not start out with it, you know, you might sort of, you don't want to give the audience too much straight away, because the rest they might get bored of the rest of the flashy stuff, if that makes sense. But it could be like a really strong opening if you want to continue that sort of intensity, or something that you like build up to in the solo. And yeah, but it's really cool as like a unique idea, but then I realised that I'd end up just sort of having that idea and kind of programming it into here, and then going, okay, click button, okay, cool, it's there. That's the sound, great. And then most people sort of stop there, and they're satisfied with that. But the more you play it, and this is why I think it's really important for people to play through ruts. If you ever hit a rut in your playing, where you're playing the same things over and over, keep playing and find something new. Keep playing and find something new. Whether that be a new track to study, whether it be a new artist to study, maybe it's a different guitarist or a different bassist or whatever sort of thing. Even studying other instruments, for example, looking at drumming exercises, for example, maybe polyrhythms and stuff like that, and maybe seeing how you can apply it to guitar. But Or maybe just finding ways to extend things. For example, a really obvious thing you could do with this is when you reach the top of the line, instead of coming back down and finishing here on this E note, because this is like you could call it an A Dorian thing, you could call it a G major thing, you could call it an E minor thing, whatever key you're coming at it from. But let's just say it's an E minor for now, just to be simple. So instead of finishing here, maybe we could continue the line. So instead of going all the way to the top and then stopping, we keep going, and then start to like push through different scale positions. And then suddenly we've accessed a whole different area of the neck, and it's this really nice smooth transition. It will require you to think on your feet and make sure that you're in, obviously you need to bring your technique up to a level where you can start to access those sort of things in your head. Because the thing which I'm doing here is I'm not trying to say we need to practice for hours and hours on end just to play that one flashy lick. What I'm saying is that you're trying to get your technique to a level where you can start to replicate the things which are happening up here. So I wanted that sound, I wanted to sort of extend it somehow, so I was thinking, how do I push it? And then that was a really obvious thing for me to do, is to just use 2 strings and just jump up through the scale positions, using a very similar lick or line, still within that subdivision. Which, if you're not sure about all those words, basically what it is just I'm keeping it exactly the same rhythmically, and I'm using the same scale. I'm not doing any fancy stuff. That's it. And suddenly, I've got a new line. Something has come from the old and it's evolved. Now, that was a really simple idea. Maybe we could take something a bit more complicated, something that's already really flashy, and then find a way to make it even flashier. I don't know, maybe we could talk about, I did a tapping line in that song, and it's sort of like a pentatonic line. So here's the line in its sort of bass form. So it's just an E minor pentatonic thing. It's just literally E minor up and down. If you listen to the notes, that's literally what it is. So how do we make that more? How do we take that places? Maybe we could change certain notes in it. Maybe we could change the rhythm. Or maybe we could use the exact same position which is already baked into here, and maybe we could change it slightly. So instead of just going straight up and down, maybe we could add some patterns in, which is a very, very obvious thing to do. Maybe stick on one string for a little bit longer. And then suddenly we've got a bit more. But something which I found quite useful is the idea of string skipping, or skipping over in terms of patterns and stuff like that. So this has already got string skipping baked into it. And you're going from the A string to the G to the high E. So we're already skipping over D and B. But something which I kind of found kind of like a comical little idea, and this is something which sort of brought me onto this idea of sort of like fretboard liberation, whatever kind of like cheesy term you want to put on this. Basically just thinking outside the box. What if I skipped over all the strings and just went from A to E directly? And I literally just thought that, and then just tried it. I didn't question the thought. I didn't go, now that's going to sound dumb. Now it's going to, because the moment you do that, you're just killing your own ideas. If you think of something unique to the guitar, maybe it's a pentatonic line, maybe it's something which you know, and you think in your head, that would sound pretty cool if I did it like this. And then see where it goes from there. So let's just play what I just did there, but just talk about like this, going from the A string to the E string. And let's see what so it's a bit of a jump, and it sounds kind of almost Holdsworthy in terms of its intervallic structure, in terms of such a wide spread and jump. But how can we take that further? So maybe come back down onto the G, and then I kind of thought, what if we take it up to the next position in E after that? Sounds pretty weird. Let's give it a try. So let's just play it slowly. So there's something there. Now let's speed up a little bit, let's see what it sounds like. Try again a little bit cleaner. And suddenly we've got something which is a unique line which has come out of something we already know. We haven't had to go online and search around millions of different videos on YouTube. We haven't had to pay for a program from some guy who's also studied and done crazy stuff. All we've done is taken pre-existing information and then tried to sort of like play with it like it's almost like a puzzle, like a weird puzzle, like a Jenga thing, you know, just like this block now goes here, and just playing with it like it's some sort of toy. Because I think we get so absorbed in the idea of exercise must be like this, rather than this is really fun, what else can we do with it? We get given a piece of information and that's it, and that's how we were taught in schools anyway, and it's like not to get all Pink Floyd and stuff like that. We're not going on that route just yet. But that's the idea. We get taught information and we regurgitate it, and very few people actually access critical thinking. So thinking for yourself and actually thinking about what we can do with those ideas that we're taught. So why don't we do the same sort of higher thinking, quote unquote, without sounding super culty? Why can't we apply that to our guitar exercises? And suddenly we start to come up with unique lines on our own. And I found that even with, as I said, pentatonic stuff. So maybe, we have a basic pentatonic position. So let's go to A minor. Maybe we can sort of like think, okay, we've got a basic pentatonic position. Everyone's played these sort of licks with like probably the triplet ideas. Probably heard that one before. Randy Rhoads done that a lot in was it Mr. Crowley, D minor, the whole that whole thing. But so how can we change pentatonic ideas up? Maybe we could add string skipping to pentatonic. Maybe let's just give it a try. So this idea. Maybe add a little bit of a pattern with that. And suddenly we've got a bit more of a unique sort of sound. Now you might not like that sound, but it's more about experimenting with it and seeing what we can get out of it. And something which I like to do quite a bit is actually add hybrid picking into the mix. So we can do a bit more of a unique sort of rhythmic pattern with it. And instead of being purely pentatonic, I'm actually going to focus on the ninth. So I'm actually going to play, in the case of A minor, I'm going to play B instead of a C. Because after experimenting with this idea a little bit, I came up with something like this. Now, as a loop, it works as like quite like a nice sort of like almost like spacey sort of sound, and it's kind of going for the Eric Johnson effect. So instead of playing notes for the sake of having millions of notes, it's more just to have that sort of soundscape, that sort of effect of speed. Because what I'm actually playing there isn't incredibly fast when you break it down, but the wide jumps make it appear to be so. I've done a lot of talking, and I see a lot of brains being fried. Is everyone doing okay?
We're good.
Does anyone have any questions about anything I've talked about?
Do you find that the speed with which you play that is actually detrimental to the melody in itself?
It's an interesting point, because it comes down to the old adage of like, is less more, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I agree with both sides.
But do you not, I mean, I really admire your technique and your skill in doing what you do, but have you ever thought that if you did that and you actually slowed it down, whether or not you would actually use that yourself as part of what you were playing?
Yeah, it's something which I sort of wrestle with on the daily, because there's not really like I don't really have a straightforward answer for that question, because it's one thing where I do like to try and think as melodically as I can, but with the speed that I have.
Sure, yes.
And that's where you kind of come to this dilemma of when you hit a certain speed, you have to accept that you lose melodic integrity.
Okay, yeah.
You have to accept
Yes.
that. However, what you gain is a different kind of sound. You gain a different sort of soundscape, and it's kind of appreciating that for what it is, rather than comparing it to a beautiful B.B. King melody.
Sure, yeah.
You cannot compare the two,
Yeah,
because they're two different sort of schools of thought, as it were. It just, not to say they can't coexist, of course they can. You can do the same thing in the track, and I think there's players out there who do both absolutely
Yes,
beautifully.
yeah.
And I like to try and play melodically, try and emulate those guys when I do play a bit slower, and try and like
Sure.
sort of milk a line for what it is, add good vibrato, make sure my bending control is really good, make sure each note is meaningful. But when I increase the speed, I kind of think about more the entire sound of the scale is like this sort of like big colour,
Gotcha.
and then kind of going like, okay, I want this colour now. And instead of sticking maybe to one scale, I might try and mix like 2 or 3 in one really fast run.
Okay.
And as a result, you kind of get this sort of interesting sort of earworm. So now I'm going to get a bit nerdy. This is right, it's not been nerdy just yet. It's going to get nerdy now. So here's a cool idea for you if you've never experimented with this kind of sound before. Here's something which you can do which makes you sound like a fusion god. Alright, this is gonna make you sound like the guy. So we have our natural minor scale. Let's just say E minor. It's a nice natural minor scale, super easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take mode 6 of melodic minor. So melodic minor is your minor scale with a raised 6th and 7th. Now in classical music, you're taught to flatten those on the way down. In jazz theory, or, so like your circa 1950s Berkeley stuff, which is more popularized, the chord scale theory, you're taught to keep the melodic minor as is, as its own unique scale, and as a result you get some really interesting sounds. So mode 6 is known as Locrian sharp 2. I like to see it as Aeolian flat 5. So Aeolian is literally just your minor scale. That's all it is. It's a really fancy name for it, but it's part of it's a major mode. So you look at the major scale, and you've got relative majors and minors. So like C major has relative A minor. It's because they share the same notes, right? And another name for major is Ionian. So for example, C Ionian is the same as A Aeolian. So enough of the background checks on that. So we've got the Aeolian scale. Now what we're going to do is we're going to flatten the 5th degree of it. That's all we're going to do. Listen to how unique the sound is when I do this. So I'm just going to play the scale, just E minor or E Aeolian. Now, Aeolian flat 5.
So you're putting a B flat in?
Yeah, literally just changing the B's to B flats. That's all it is. So that's what the flat 5 is. Just finding the 5th degree and flattening it, or lowering it, depending, because if it's if it's already flat, just going down again, just lowering it a semitone. Okay. But just for the sake of simplicity, flat 5. Now it's actually it's an idea that I use very, very commonly, where I'll play a lick, maybe I'll do like a really fast run in, like, let's say E minor for now, and then I will change that one note part way through the lick. So I will change scales from Aeolian to Aeolian flat 5. Sounds complicated, but all I'm doing is changing one note. That is it. So in this case, B to B flat. That is it. So let's just try that out and let's see what that sounds like. And you can tell me whether it sounds like, now you know the magic, now you know the trick, you're going to be like, oh, this is so easy now, it's whatever. But just try and imagine the sound if you heard this on a record, and whether you could pick this out and know what's going on. So let's just play it a second. So suddenly that sounds like we know what we're talking about. Suddenly. And that's what I mean. It doesn't need to be complicated to be like considered a fusion line or something like that. You don't need to go and study years and years of Larry Carlton. Not to say that that's not a good thing to do. Go do that. It's an amazing thing. But you can access these really exotic sounds without going a million miles from home. Another idea, which is one which I really like from Mike Stern, because it's not a lazy idea, but I sort of seen it as a lazy idea for me. The idea of playing outside by just shifting things literally left to right on the fretboard. So for example, pentatonic scale. This is a great sort of thing which you might be able to do. So I'm sticking E minor for now. So the idea of kind of going like, so that's what I do. And then suddenly we just go on, all I've done is go pentatonic scale, then up a semitone, then down a semitone from the original key, then back to home. And then suddenly it sounds like this really advanced thing. And all I've done is gone That's what my head's done. I'm not thinking about any complicated notes. And this is something which I've been asked before, so if you're wondering, no, I'm not thinking of every note that I'm playing when it goes through my head. No. It's packaged information. It's literally how it is. So, for example, an F1 driver going around a corner, do you think he's going to think about the exact braking power, or do you think he's going to think, brake, turn? That's it. That's all you've got time for. So this comes with the idea of practicing slowly to develop comfort and knowledge of what you're doing. Then speeding up to a point where you can start to process information at highest levels, yes. But then when you actually start to play at these lightning fast speeds, all I'm thinking is E minor scale. I'm not thinking, oh, whatever. But what you can do is you can start to think about targeted notes. So what I like to think is, for example, I'm going to finish this lick on an F sharp. And then I'll just keep an eye out for an F sharp when I'm going. For example, let's try that. So and there's that goes. If you want to clarify, there's the 11th fret of G, which is an F sharp. There we go. So that's sort of the idea there. So I would think about target tones and chords as we go through any improvisation. Wow, this got way nerdier than I thought it was going to be. And hopefully you guys are keeping up. And
Excuse me, just
yeah, for sure. You go ahead. I think it's time for some more playing. I think that's what this calls for. Just a bit more of that. And if you want any questions outside of music theory or outside of technique, feel free to ask. Favorite color, what's the name of your dog? But I don't mind. Right, let's have a look here.
I think the encouragement for me, Charles, that you're sharing is, so from my background, we talk a lot about research and evaluation and stuff.
Yes.
Actually, what this is something I'm passionate about is research and practice. I see far too much academia, and I don't see, certainly in health and social care, I see lots and lots of studies. I don't see a lot of change coming out of academics. And I think there's a sweet spot, which is, yes, it's important to have the evidence, but the evidence has got to bring about change, otherwise it's just dry.
Yeah.
And similarly with the practice, what I'm picking up from this is actually experiment, explore. Be thoughtful, be committed, but actually it's research and practice. Try something different, see if it works, explore that, keep going, and constantly expand and extend, but don't read up on it. Don't stick to it. Actually try and find your boundaries and do the research and practice.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to reach the higher levels of technique, in terms of playing stuff I'm playing, there is an element of drills where you've got to sit down for a couple hours and each day and do the same kind of exercises to develop the motor neuron connections, that kind of stuff. To literally develop even the fastest muscle fibers, that kind of thing. And I was pretty blessed with genetics because I was able to play quite quickly from a young age. So a year and a half in, I was able to play, Paul Gilbert tunes and stuff like that. So technical difficulties and scarified and that kind of thing. Although my hands were a little bit smaller then, so the stretches for scarified were absolutely terrifying. But I was able to manage them, and now I actually use them in my own compositions just because I like the sound of them. So again, extracting information, not thinking too hard about it, and then trying to make it something which is my own. So a lot of people will tell you to steal things from artists, and what people think they mean by that is mimic. And there is a level of mimicry which you need to have to help guide you into what you want to do. So you might like that exact sound. So of course you need to mimic the notes that they're playing, how they're playing it, the guitars they're using, the amps, being really loud, being really quiet, that kind of thing. But eventually you got to take the step into the brave new world of what you're trying to do. So changing it, manipulating it to what your sound will be, if that makes sense. And that only happens through experimentation. That doesn't happen just by practicing the same things over and over. So yeah, I mean, the thing is that I've studied a lot of different ways of practice and that kind of thing. And in fact, some of the most efficient ones have actually been to practice in, let's say, 5-minute blocks on an exercise. That's right. So in an hour, you plan out 5-minute blocks, which means you've got 12 things. It might be 12 licks, it might be in the same scale, it might be different positions in that scale. 5 minutes. The reason why is because our brains get really, really bored with doing the same thing for hours. we've all done it where, well, at least I've done it, I don't know whether you guys have done it, but the experience of just burnout in practice, where you're sitting there, you've played the same bloody solo for 3 hours and it's not sounding any better, it's just kind of being a bit crap, you know, and you just get bogged down in it and you're making more mistakes, and then you go away and you come back to it the next day and suddenly it feels way better. Why is that? Well, it's background processing.
Sorry, I've got to go.
No worries.
Being called away.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, I really enjoyed it so far.
No worries.
See you again.
Feel free to check the rest online. Aha. So but the 5-minute box thing basically gives you a time limit. So you're working to that deadline. After the 5 minutes, even if you haven't fully achieved what you wanted to achieve on the exercise, you move on. It resets your brain. It gives your brain something new to do, and suddenly that 1 hour is way more effective than 5 or 6 hours. Because I love practice, but I also have things to do, and I can't practice for 7 or 8 hours a day anymore. Like in lockdown I could, when I was a kid I could, but now I have to work, to pay bills, I have to do other things, and yeah, playing music is part of that, but that's not necessarily practice. There's a huge difference between the two.
Would you say with the 5-minute block thing, it like resets your brain quicker as well? Like you say, going over a solo for ages and then coming back to it next day, you feel like, for me, I feel better. Like it's a proper reset. If you like, say, split it up into 5 minutes and then come back to the same lick at the end of the hour or the start of the next hour, is there a bit of a reset then still? Or
it definitely helps, but it's kind of the idea of, and this is something which people won't tell you, stick to the same speed on your metronome and do practice with the metronome when you're doing this stuff. What I mean by that is, don't do this exercise for 5 minutes and then go, oh, I can do it at 60, let's try 120. You know, stick to 60, not just for one day, but for an entire week. Get super comfortable with it, to the point where you could do this while sipping a cup of tea. Then bump it up by 10 BPM. Not the full thing, 10. Get a full rhythmic understanding of it. Get to the point where you live and breathe this thing. Then eventually you'll be able to reach the max tempo and more, and you'll be able to do it with full control. There'll be no questioning in your mind where this should sound kind of like this, or how do I do this again, or that full sort of practice thing where people sort of like try and hammer away at it at the max tempo, and they come away from it and they got it right, they got the notes, but it doesn't sound exactly right. Have you ever heard that sort of thing? Maybe in your own playing, maybe in someone else's playing, where they play this solo, and it's not quite like the record, and you don't know why. You know, it could be. This isn't unique to guitar. This is any instrument, and it's literally because we've not familiarised ourselves with it enough to do it.
Well, it's the old thing. I mean, whatever you do, it's not practice that makes perfect. It's perfect practice that makes perfect.
Exactly.
You can just get faster and faster at doing it wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. And unluckily, when we're sitting down and practicing, we don't have somebody. We do in lessons and stuff like that. If you still have guitar lessons with people or like guitar coaches, then that's great. But when you're doing your own practice, no one's sitting there with you, so you've got to be able to have some sort of agency of what you're doing. Don't just mindlessly do. Yeah. And that's what the 5-minute blocks do. Because another thing is I will add natural pauses into my practice. What I mean by that is it'll be small pauses. It might be I'll just have like a 1 beat pause. So like it might be like a quintuplet thing. And that 1 beat, eventually your brain gets really used to analysing what happened in that beat before. On top of that, if your hand gets tired, like to the point where you're feeling like, oh my god, rest. Even if you surpass the 5 minutes, rest. Take a little breather, have some coffee. Practice completely relaxed. Don't practice with tension. That's where you get problems with RSI, that's where you get problems with that kind of stuff, because you end up practicing with tension and causing a lot of problems to your body. When I'm playing this really fast stuff, believe it or not, my touch is very, very light. The speed itself compensates for the actual impact that I'm adding my fingers, because power is speed times strength. So as I travel faster, I use less strength. That's a very simple thing. There's no muscles in the hand. We do develop, the muscles are actually connected here through tendons. They're actually here, which is why when you move your fingers, you get the sort of like thing here. There's a lot of sinew and stuff like that, and you can develop strength in the tendons themselves. But you also know what happens if you overuse those tendons, and that's the scary word, tendonitis. And that's 6 months of playing. That's rehabilitation. That's all that kind of stuff. So when we're practicing, I always advise my students this because not many people talk about it in the guitar world. You got a lot of amazing people, especially in the 80s, when it was very sort of like sort of the Wild Wild West in terms of practice, because you have people playing like this amazing stuff, but then with objectively poor technique, but still playing these amazingly fast lines, but muscling through it. And then when they get older, you wonder why they can't play like they did in the 20s, and that's because their body is literally deteriorating. Case in point, not to call anybody out, I'm a big fan of your work. If you are somehow watching this, Marty Friedman. So we're looking at Megadeth. We're looking at his own solo project. He's done some amazing stuff. His picking technique gives me anxiety. It looks like this.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever seen it?
Yeah.
He also plays with his whole hand like this, like scrunched up to the neck, whilst playing these really cool exotic lines. And I actually took a lot of inspiration from Marty, specifically for his exotic lines and use of like these really outside sounds. And I love his playing. But then I listen to him now, and you can hear he's actually not able to play the lines with the same articulation as what he did when he was younger. And it's not because of lack of practice. It's probably because he's probably in a lot of pain. And I've heard a lot of things about other players which are going through similar things. We forget that, even though the guitar itself is a tool, we are human beings. We're strong in a lot of ways, but we're also quite fragile with certain movements. Even playing tennis too long, and suddenly you've got RSI in the elbow. So try and practice with sort of like a bit of a awareness about what's going on with your body. It's Alexander technique, I think, is like the classical thing where they practice with like complete relaxation. So you'd be aware about if you're playing something, are you tense anywhere in the body? It might be some tension in this shoulder for some reason when you're just doing a left hand exercise. Okay, try and forcefully relax this. Become aware of your of your body, your surroundings, that kind of thing. Not the hippie crap, don't worry, nothing like that. Just straight up, just think, is there any tension anywhere in your body, and how can you alleviate that so that you're not super tense when playing a line? And it means that when you play live, you also have a much easier time. You can focus much more on the performance. You can enjoy the music more rather than being in pain.
Well, most people put too much effort in.
Yeah.
If you play and it's good every now and again you stop and see how hard do I press those strings.
Yeah.
And do I need to? And then you see that most people press them very hard.
Yeah, massively.
I find with like seating position and stuff as well, like getting in, swapping it from having it on it to kind of going more classical a little bit, because I get a lot of pain
Snap.
under my right
Really
shoulder blade and stuff, like just from being like this for too much, too long, and
So
I've got to keep changing positions.
the classical guitarists, I hate to admit this, they got it right. They've done it for hundreds of years, they got it right. This position, ergonomically for your body, is amazing.
Yeah,
The footstool, that kind of
straightens up,
thing.
yeah.
Like
a bit.
you might have a bit of if you sit with a bit of slouch, you might have a bit of pain in your lower back over a couple of years. But as long as you take care of it and use the stretches, that's fine. But like that's an amazing thing, and I've practiced like this before. I personally have just settled for this. I don't know what it is, but I found that for me, I'm able to keep a much more upright position than what I was before when I was a teenager, playing like this now. There are times I catch myself doing this, and I will be aware of it, and I'll just try and just literally just sit up straighter. That's literally what I do. On top of that, if you want to get really into it, just physical fitness, so doing stretches. Something we don't really think about too much, but there's actually, I remember watching a documentary with Zakk Wylde. So we all know Zakk Wylde, right? So mega famous guitarist. Is Ozzy Osbourne's guitarist for many years, if you don't know, but and he's also very famous in his own right with Black Label Society and his own solo projects and work. But he literally does gym workouts before he goes on tour. So I think he just goes to the gym anyway because he's a pretty built guy, Like literally looks like a real life Viking. It's amazing. and I think that fits his aesthetic really well for his playing. You know, just what he's doing. But he will literally do, like, for example, like lower back exercises and everything like that, because he wears a guitar very low. It's part of his aesthetic, and it's what he's done for probably years and years and years, and he doesn't want to change that. So he tries and takes care of his physical health. So when he does go out and do a lot of gigs or shows, he's not hurting himself. He's trying to save himself a bunch of pain, basically, because he's probably experienced that and then thought, how do I change that? But he's one of the first people that I've seen actually looking after themselves outside of just Alexander technique, like, you know, as a musician, like thinking about everything. And I even met some good personal friends of mine who actually had to take months out of playing because of physical injury or tendinitis in the shoulder or something like that. So they might have to take like 3 or 4 weeks out of gigs. And when you gig for a living, taking a month off of work isn't ideal, because I know that I wouldn't like, you know, relying on just savings for getting by, and then also having to sort of remarket myself to let people know I'm back, rather than saying no for an extended period of time.
You can also just sell the Les Paul.
There you go, yeah. That's a genuine thing. So this guitar here, if you've never seen one before, it's a VGA, it's a French thing, but it's actually really light. So when I wear it on stage, I actually wear it quite high, so it's, you know, much more comfortable for me. And also it's kind of like I set it up so that when I'm sitting and I stand up, it's in roughly the same spot, so that my practice sitting down translates to my practice standing up. Because of what a lot of guitarists do is they have to practice both, because of stand up and then the guitar will do this, and suddenly their wrist is at a whole different angle, and we don't really consider that very much. So that's just for any instrument. So it'd be the same for bass. I recommend it for that. It'd be the same for, I don't know, I think you kind of get away with it with flute and that kind of thing, because it's already, like, you know, up here anyway. But I know that it's really important for classical players, because I know a lot of violinists that they end up getting like really bad shoulders and stuff because they're always like this, if they practice. So they end up having to do some sort of physical exercise or stretches just to alleviate pain and to rebuild the shoulder muscles and stuff like that, because of how much deterioration there is from being like this. So yeah, remember, you're human beings, people. That's kind of the story, the thing of the message in there. Anyway, I said I was going to do some playing like half an hour ago, and I wouldn't get away with it on the actual gig, so I think I should give you guys some music. That's what I'd like to do anyway. So without further ado, let's try. Let's do this one. Alright, so one cool thing which you can definitely take from that one is there's a few different sort of unique arpeggios in there which I came up with a few years ago, to be honest, because I wanted to basically be clever, and it's not a good idea to always do this, to write to be clever, but sometimes you can get some cool things out of it, and this is what happened with this. And it went through a few different evolutionary stages before it reached what I've reached now. But I wanted to find a way to play through a minor 2-5-1 with some more unique arpeggios. So I went through and I was like, okay, I'm going to put all these different extensions into it and then try and plan it on the fretboard. So eventually, let's stick to the key of A minor. I'll play the end result rather than telling you all the stages, because there's loads of different like sort of blueprints for this, which I could go for hours on just each. But here's the arpeggios. So minor 2-5-1, for anyone who doesn't know, would be just the second chord in a minor scale. So when it's harmonized to 4 notes, we get a minor 7 flat 5. In this case, B minor 7 flat 5. Then we get an E 7 flat 9, and then we get like an A minor 7. So all together. You must have heard that millions of times in jazz, that kind of thing. So because it comes up so often, I wanted to come up with a unique way to play around it, which is more me, rather than playing other people's lines over it. So over the minor 7 flat 5 chord, I hit with this. Over the 7 flat 9. And over the A minor. And what I did was I kept the same sort of blueprint for how I was picking it. So again, thinking about like unique ideas that we can sort of play with, I decided to this time play around with the idea of symmetrical sort of notes per line. And what I mean by that is the notes in each line are like this. You've got 3, then 1 note, then 3 notes, then 2 notes, then 1, then 3. So each of the patterns within this has that exact same formula. 3, 1, 3, and then 2, 1, 3. So 3, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3. And it's a really cool thing to do, and even though it lends itself really well to economy picking, for anybody familiar with that technique, the idea is, for economy picking, for anyone who doesn't know, is kind of like a combination between alternate picking, so picking up and down for every single note, and sweep picking, the idea of sweeping through the strings with one stroke. So for example, if I was to alternate pick, which is my normal sort of thing to go to, for this line, I go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. An economy picker would do this. Down, up, down, 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 down, up, down. So they add like a mini sweep in between each one. And it's the most economical motion which you could have on the guitar, which is why it's called economy picking. And if you want to study that further, there's a guitar player called Frank Gambale, who's literally the guy who wrote the book on it, the literal book. And he played with guys like Chick Corea and stuff like that, so massive guitarist. And yeah, I'd recommend checking him out. But he does that all the time, and he actually plays a pentatonic scale, kind of like this. Yeah. Yeah. So he'd do it like that, so sweeping through it like that, rather than playing. That's how he'd do it. So I haven't studied that very much, but that's kind of like how it goes. So, yeah, but I decided to strictly alternate pick these to give myself a bit of an extra challenge, and also to sort of like level up my playing in that aspect. So if I've ever chucked any tricky lines, my brain was a bit more used to dealing with odd note groupings rather than just the same sort of 3 note per string exercises that every guitarist has got online. because there's millions of those. So again, thinking outside the box to sort of come up with unique sounds, and that's just ideas that you can use, and feel free to take them into places where I haven't even thought of. You know, there's no rules on this stuff. So I, as I said, broke it down into notes on, like, number of notes on each string. Then the idea of string skipping, the idea of maybe manipulating patterns in terms of rhythm. So there's certain lines that I've played on the album where they actually don't fit into a strict subdivision for one beat. For example, the idea of having 13 notes over 2 beats, which I won't play now because I don't have the backing track for this on there, but the idea is, if you wanted to break that down, it'd be 6.5 notes per beat, which sounds really complicated, but instead of thinking like that, all I did was I played a line, I didn't think about it, I didn't think about the theory, I just played it and analysed it later, but I thought about just the sound that I wanted. And it was almost like this idea of, like, I wanted a rushed sound, so I knew I had 2 beats to squeeze it into. So I squeezed those notes in and made it fit rhythmically. And then when I went to analyse it later and transcribe it, I realised that it didn't fit into a sextuplet, so it didn't fit into 6 notes per beat, and it didn't fit into a septuplet. It was in between. And then I realised I had to do it over 2 beats in terms of transcription rather than 1 beat. And that opens up a whole new world, because like players like Nelson Darius are very, very well known for this, and Alan Holdsworth is another very big name for this. But they might play 17 even notes over a bar of 4, which doesn't sound impressive to people who don't really know about subdivisions. But all I'm going to say is that is absolutely mental to be able to think like that. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and listen to their playing, and it will just sound alien. Not because of the notes they're playing, which there's an element of that, but more because of the rhythm, and it's a rhythmic language that we're not used to. So sometimes taking a little bit of the crazy and putting it into what you know can sort of spice up your playing a little bit. Anyway, does anyone have any questions? But if not, I've got a lot more playing to do. I'd love to do that.
Just a question on the tracks that you've been playing.
Yeah.
Is there? I know you've talked about improvisation and then also writing solos as well. Is there elements of improvisation still in these ones, or are they just completely like what you've written?
So what I'm playing now, the solos are improvised, and some of the articulations for the melody and stuff like that are improvised.
Ah, cool.
So it's on the album. They are written, structured, like to the nth degree. But for what I'm doing now, I like to have improv when I play live. When I played the track earlier, Sunday Easy, like the first like metal-y track, that was actually very close to the written solo, because I do like that. So for example, like I might find an opening line that I really like, so I always open it up with that particular thing and then evolve it from there. Sometimes I might get bored with that and I might just think, oh, I just want to improvise solely today. But when I want to get things right, like for example today, I was feeling a bit like, oh, okay, I don't really trust what I'm going to go for. So I just thought, to make myself more comfortable, I'll take the written stuff that's already, I know is already good. Because I listened to it, I wrote it, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And I'll use that opening as a way to get into stuff. And then, that's it, you know? That's all it would be. And then you can kind of like go from where to whatever place you want after that. Does that make sense? So it's like, I like to do both. So improvising totally. So today, like that track there, was improvised totally apart from the last line, so the extended legato line, which actually has a really interesting idea, which will show you how much I'm talking about playing around with the ideas of the guitar and the fretboard. So here is the line. I'll play it slowly just so you can see it. So it's in the key, it's the key of E flat minor. There it is. Sped up. Right. So there, I'm playing across the entire fretboard, string skipping and jumping between positions. It's literally just this idea of kind of like, if you look, the jump is absolutely massive. And then kind of going up a half whole scale thing at the end and that kind of thing. But the main idea of that was actually that starting lick was actually just an idea that I was experimenting with, about kind of thinking I wanted really wide melodic jumps, or sorry, intervallic jumps, not melodic, intervallic jumps. But I wanted to keep that sort of same sort of speed that I had with my left hand. And I could do that by doing like more pentatonic stretches, which is what I've done in the past a lot. So maybe like kind of like to get like more wider intervals. But I felt like it was lacking a little bit, and I didn't want to just keep rinsing that same idea. It just felt a bit boring at that point. So that boredom forced evolution. It forced me to think outside the box again. So never be afraid to try out your crazy ideas. If you think this is going to be really cool, just do it. Worst case, it's not going to sound as good as what you thought, and then you make it, and you just keep adjusting until it does sound good. Because that didn't start out like that, I'll tell you that much, because it sounded pretty rubbish when I first played it, but then I practiced it a little bit and I was like, actually that's really cool. And then suddenly I was able to do that. And sometimes we also forget, when we're playing all the time, if you are a professional musician or you're practicing a lot as a as a budding artist or starting out, we're always raising the bar by playing. So sometimes we stick to this same level and we just have this image of ourselves being like here. But we keep growing by playing. So if we're not constantly trying to push that boat, whether that be technically or whether that be in terms of what other melodies can come up with, what other sounds can create, then we're doing ourselves a little bit of a disservice. We're underestimating ourselves. We've got to try and like break away from that image of this is exactly what I do, and think more open-mindedly about what we can achieve with what we've already got, and then also how we can push that boat. I think that's the main message of this sort of masterclass, is more, don't get stuck in I do this and that is it. Break out of that. Think ahead and constantly evolve. Don't be complacent, because it's a genuinely true thing where a lot of professionals out there are just everlasting students, and I hope I consider myself amongst those sort of people where I will just keep studying until the day which I die. That's the kind of thing, isn't like always learn. There's always something. It doesn't matter from what source. It could be some sort of like line that you heard on a pop song, or something that you heard on a TV show and you think that's a really cool thing, how can I play around with that? It could be directly from an inspirational source that you already know. It could be from a new album or a song or a solo that you've listened to 500 times, and that one line which you ignored all this time finally sticks out at you. And it might be buried in the mix somewhere and you listen to it on a different pair of headphones, and then you've got to learn it. But just keep doing that thing. That's it. Keep playing. Talking about keep playing, let's play another. I think how much time we got? Because I got a couple of tracks for you I could do. Yeah.
Is everybody okay?
I'm good.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I've been talking a lot, and we've lost some people. I hope that's not because of my talking, because that'd be a shame. But yeah, let's play a couple other tracks. So some of these have some pretty interesting ideas. And so I'll save the ballady one, ballady being a very loose term, for the last one. So let's go with this one for now.
Nice.
So yeah, again, like, there's just something really cool about experimentation and trying to find unique sounds, and this album is kind of full of that. The upcoming one, which should be released in mid-January, that's the aim, that's the goal. But each track, even though there's obviously the same sort of sound in terms of me being me and only being able to play like me at this point, you know, because I can do good impressions of people, but there will obviously be an element of how I say things now on the guitar. And that's the kind of place where I've always wanted to be, so I'm very happy to be there now. But on the album I try and explore a lot of different ideas in terms of even different genres and that kind of thing. So it's got that same sort of sound of the electric guitar breaking through, but there's one track which sadly I don't have the backing track for right now, but it's a really interesting one, where it's a 7/8 sort of Latin fusion tune. That's right. And it's actually an original tune which I wrote when I was still a university student, when I was like, 18, and I wrote it in like an hour and a half on Sibelius. That's right. But I really liked the sound of it, so I adapted it into like a full band context, and it worked really well on the gig which we played. It was a really hard one to sort of rehearse, because the drummer wrote this incredibly tasty groove, which was way better than anything I could write. But the problem is that the rest of the band weren't like mega like confident with this particular groove, like keeping that 7/8 thing, because it was really fast. So it was one of the things we had to rehearse quite a lot, which was a really fun experience, to be honest. When we played it live, it went without a hitch. They're incredible players, but it's just like when you play things that are slightly out of your wheelhouse, it can be a really difficult thing. Like at the minute, I'm really well versed in the rock thing and the fusion-y thing and that sort of area. But if you ask me to go and do, like, let's say, a really authentic heavy blues cruise, let's say, that would be really difficult for me to do at this point. I'd have to sit down, I'd have to go over some old records and just make sure that I'm in that vibe. Because we can only be as proficient as we can be in like the areas that we're practicing in. And this is something which I do whenever I've got like a session for a particular thing, or if I've got a gig to do, let's say whenever I'm playing at the Troy Bar, which is again a really heavy hitting place to gig, because there's a lot of world-class players that are on the house band there. So whenever I get called for that, I'll always spend the evening, because I'll get called on the day for that gig. I'll have to drive into London, I'll be teaching in the day, and I'll just get a random phone call being like, hey, are you free tonight? It'll be cool. I don't know who I'm playing with, I don't know the set list, there's nothing, you don't get given anything, you just got to tell them you got to know. So what I do is I'll go over the set list which they've got, sort of, the 50 odd tunes they got on Spotify, which will play about 5 of, because each tune's extended to about 10 or 12 minutes, because everyone takes 3-minute solos, which is a really cool experience. But you just got to know it, and so I'll sit there and I'll practice the particular fusion tunes of what I'm expecting to play. So it's like an estimated guess from my experience of being there. And normally it's pretty on the money, because we play very similar tunes each time. So you kind of like, there might be 1 or 2 oddballs, so you kind of like try and like work through the list as you get that gig, if that makes sense. But it's about trying to maintain that sort of feel, that sort of fusion-y funk thing which they're going for on that particular night. So there's some really cool tunes which have some really simple harmony sometimes. Sometimes it's quite complex, sometimes it is quite out there. But there's one tune in particular which has a really cool vibe, which is only 3 chords, and you've got to make those 3 chords sound really good. And the 3 chords are, in case you're wondering, you just want some mystery 3-chord sequences. What could it be? Is it a 4-5-1? No, it's not. But it's E minor, C major 7, B7 sharp 5, maybe to B7 if you want to make it a bit fancy, then another E minor sort of sound. Now, you can also make it a bit more spicy if you want to have like a lead back into the E minor just to mark like the loop, but in the actual track that doesn't exist. But sometimes they just chuck it in there, just a bit of extra variation because of the amount of time you're playing with one lick. The melody is also not a very long one either, so it's literally like one, two, three, four, and then a melody again, and then solos. That's it. And that has to be entertainment for quite a large crowd for about 10 or 12 minutes.
Wow.
Now, suddenly, those 3 chords now sound a lot more difficult, right? Because how many people have sat in their room and practiced over a simple backing track and kind of not, I'm going to say gotten bored, but that's quite a strong statement, gotten kind of bored with what they're playing, like they don't know what else to do, they kind of get lost and start repeating the same ideas what they did, you know, right at the beginning of the solo. Like, I've had that experience many times when I was growing up and practicing and stuff like that, because I used to love going on YouTube, finding a backing track and then going, you know, and then having loads of fun on that for 2 or 3 hours, whatever it is, you know, maybe not the same track, but you know, it might be a half an hour on one track and that kind of thing, but I'd end up playing the same lines, the same licks, the same everything in every key which I'm going into. So something which this mindset sort of opens you up to as well is the idea of exploring things outside of what you know and not being afraid to delve into what I would say is true improvisation. Because when we actually improvise, I'd say on a good day when I'm improvising at a show, about 30% of that would be actual improvisation. And what I mean by that is lines I have not practiced. Most of improvisation are lines that you practice and then regurgitate later. Which is why when I started practicing like this with the idea of playing around with ideas, suddenly I started getting more of these ideas on stage, live. And then it's about having the confidence in your own ability to then start executing ideas that you've never thought of before or never even played before in front of people whilst playing with world-class players. That is when I started really cutting my teeth on this sort of mindset and sort of really giving it a lot of praise, if that makes sense, just in my own sort of way of thinking and really solidifying that. That really opened my mind and kind of went, okay, now I'm starting to play things which actually sound a lot more interesting than what they were 3 years ago. And that only happened because I forced myself into a situation where I had to, again, like, because of demand, I had to evolve. I had to do this now. Like, there wasn't an exit. I couldn't just leave. I was being paid to be there. And they would still pay me if I messed up, you know, and that would be it, but then I just wouldn't get the call again. Yeah. That's how it would be. And it's already a shared gig where I'm sharing it with a couple other guitarists, which are, you know, so at the minute they're currently doing it because they've just recently come off tour with massive acts. So I'm some, you know, in the grand scheme of things, some nobody dude from Devon who's just plays a lot of guitar in his bedroom who happens to have done some cool stuff. Like, I don't have any mega, like, you know, touring credits under my belt or anything like that just yet. But it goes to show that with this sort of mindset and everything like that, I'm able to fit in with players of that ilk and have no problem. There's no gears grinding anywhere, there's no whatever. And the only thing that's ever let me down in those contexts has been my own confidence in that ability. That's literally it. It's not the playing, it's not the songs, it's not anything, it's not the prep, it's just my own mindset of thinking, can I do this? And when I got over that, after doing the gig like once or twice, it was there, you know, and I was able to play, and I took that obviously to other shows, to everything else that I'm doing. Because it's not, you know, if you have like a almost like a life-altering experience. Not necessarily, you know, like that, but to me, that's what that was, you know, because it was consolidation of years and years and years of practice on a stage where I thought, man, this is the level, because this isn't where you go to show it to people, this is where you go to play for the other players. This is like the place where people go to kind of like, you know, hang, if that makes sense. So I was really fortunate to be called for those things, and I hope I'm called for it more in the future because it's really fun. But it's also a really cool challenge because I don't know what tune's going to be called. So you just got to learn a lot of songs, and that's something which I was told constantly going through, but just learn absolutely loads of songs as well. You know, the writing thing which I was talking about earlier is very valid, but you get even more ammo for that writing if you learn more songs. Talking about that, I think I'm going to play one more song, and I think it's a good time to end it because I've been talking for a long time. You guys are still awake, you're doing really well. There's a test at the end, you know, so we've got to get some pens out and stuff. But no, but seriously, thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions before or after the thing, I'm obviously happy to answer those before we cap off. But I think we'll finish off with this tune and then let these guys have a rest because, man, you've done a really amazing job today. You know? Yeah. So I just want to say a massive thank you to the WM guys.
Yeah.
So like a massive because it's just a really, really cool thing, and I feel absolutely privileged to go to work with them on such a personal level, and I've done that for years, and I don't say enough that you guys are great to work with, and I thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, that'd be cool. And I hope to be able to help you out as much as I can in the future with whatever I do, you know. Anyway, let's finish up with one more song, and then we'll cap it off there. Let's go. So this one is a very loosely described ballad. That's right, I know. It's a very strong word. Let's go for it.
Thank you.